So greetings, brothers, associates, friends, colleagues. I wanted to take an opportunity to share with you an exciting project that's happening in our Passionist parish, St. Gabriel's in Toronto, and with our Passionist community in Canada. As you know, in 2020, Father Joachim called all Passionists throughout the world during the Jubilee period, the 300th anniversary of the Passionists, that we would begin a process of renewal and reinvigoration of our ministries. And we've been attempting to do that in our province. So when we began discussions in Canada, looking into the future with a rich tradition, and knowing some of the challenges we'd be facing, we made the determination to use the synodal process to call the parish and the Passionists into a synodal process, as Pope Francis has called the entire church. But this would be a Passionist synodal process. And we wanted to do what Pope Francis asked the whole church to do, to create a process where we could walk together with one another, that we could listen deeply to one another, and we could allow the Holy Spirit to suggest new ways to move into the future, always listening to the voices at the margins. And we use that inspiration to call the Synod in Toronto. And so for a year and a half, we've had this synodal process happening. And again, working with a small team of leaders, as well as Passionists, we created this synodal process and the parish entered it. The first part was a virtual because of the pandemic. The second part was in person, and we began, most importantly, with 3 plenary meetings in the parish, and upwards of 100 parishioners participated in these really dynamic sessions of young and old and all types of thinking. And during those sessions, we placed 2 considerations before the community. The one question was, what does it mean to be a Passionist parish as we move into the future? Why continue this covenant between the Passionists and the charism and the local community? Second consideration was, as we move into the future and as we bring this mission into the future, what kind of leadership do you want? What kind of leadership do you think in this moment in history does this parish community need? And so the 3 plenary sessions were extraordinary. They were inspirational, they were challenging, they were honest, and there was extraordinary feedback that was happening within the sessions. And the 2 results of the plenary sessions, if I could narrow it down to 2, would be regarding why are we a Passionist parish and what does it mean to us. There's a great desire on the part of the people who participated to want to know more, to want to be formed more deeply in the Passionist charism, as the charism is understood today, standing in solidarity with the crucified, hearing the cry of the earth, standing with the crucified God and meditating on that mystery. They wanted more. They wanted to know more, and they wanted it to be more front and center in their parish community. In regarding leadership, it was clear that the community, by and large, wanted a broader way of thinking about the gifts that the community has. Young and old, men and women, people of different ways of thinking, that those gifts could be called forth more explicitly in how the parish was being led, all the while, of course, maintaining it as a diocesan parish structure, but amplifying the gifts of the people of God. And so subsequent, after the sessions, the committee, we really worked hard to begin to think, how can we respond to the suggestions of the Spirit, using Pope Francis's thinking? If this is really the suggestion of the Spirit, how do we take it seriously? And how might we present to the parish new ways of walking forward into the future? So I want to share with you today a graphic that may, at least in graphic form, help you to see where we feel the parish is moving and the kind of the exciting developments that are happening. So as you'll see from the diagram, the first important affirmation is that the parish community is a community that is in synod. It is a community in the synodal process, and it will remain that way. The synod is not something that began and ended. It is a way of being church, that we will constantly intentionally walk with one another, listen to one another, and constantly be listening to the suggestions of the Spirit. As within that synodal community, you'll see that we've begun the ministry of synodal facilitators. And these facilitators are chosen from the community, within the community, and they are trained, and they are being trained to be facilitators of ongoing meetings of groups, of ministry groups, of groups of parishioners, to continually be in reflection and continually to be in discernment about where the Spirit is calling us as a parish community and as a passionist parish. As you'll see in the upper left corner of the circle of leadership, we'll call it, is a new ministry that we're calling mission directors. And the mission directors will be appointed by the provincial and council, similar to a retreat director, that they'd be appointed as people that understand the charism, are convinced of the need to continually hear, particularly for us, the voices of the crucified, the voices of a crucified earth, to be in union with crucified Christ, and to call the parish to that. And all that the parish is doing, whether it's daily activities or whether it's planning and visioning or it's how things are done, calling the parish that we need to be mission aligned, mission drenched. This ministry of mission director is open to any of the baptized, male, female, young or old, anyone who has the skills to be called forth to lead in this capacity. If you see alongside the mission directors, will be a team of passionists, ordained passionists, also appointed by the provincial and council. One of those passionists, ordained passionists, will be appointed pastor or administrator of the community. And again, will fulfill all the diocesan regulations, all the diocesan requirements, and of course be in full communion always with the Archbishop and the Archdiocese. There'll be another passionist that will also be part of this leadership team that will assist in the ministerial life, the sacramental life of the parish, and also this formation of the movement of the community in charism. If you notice to the left and below the mission directors is a body that we're calling the Mission Council. And the Mission Council will be made up of voices, of people who actually represent, either through their experience in their ministries, their vocations, their life work, or through their personal experiences, their lived experiences, the voices at the margins. So this council will be made up, again, appointed by the provincial or affirmed by the provincial and council, suggested by the mission directors and passionists on staff. But these people will represent, and there'll be 5 or 6 to begin the council. They will represent the voices that the Synod said should be represented in our decision making. They should be heard. And the voices that were brought forth were, for example, the voices of women. Despite the presence of women, sometimes the voices of women are sometimes marginalized in the governance of the church. The voices of the indigenous communities, an extraordinarily painful part of Canadian history, and the voices that the community felt really should have a voice. The voices of people of color, the voices of young people, the voices of the LGBTQ community, the voices of the earth. And a unique part of this council is the empty seat, constantly reminding these members of the council and all the members of the ministry team who's missing, who's not here, what voices aren't we here. And those are the voices that the Synod said, again, the gathered assembly said should be heard in how we make decisions and how this community moves forward. If you see right below that, we've also additionally added the idea of an external facilitator. And that facilitator will be working from day one with this team, because as you roll out a new model of ministry, one that's complicated, a bit complex, how does a facilitator help this team continually think about itself? How is it functioning? How is it operating? How is it on mission? And how is it balancing the authority and the goals that the community has and the individuals that make up that team? Along with these these new ministries will of course be the leaders, the established leaders of the parish, the pastoral leaders, the youth minister, ministers with the aged, as well as the leaders of the finance committee, the building committee, ministries that are particular to the St. Gabriel's parish. So this model I offer you today just to give you a sense, a glimpse of what we're developing in Toronto. A little over 3 months ago, we had a town hall meeting, and we invited the parish back, especially those that were in the synodal process, to hear the results of the workings and the deliberations of the group that had put together the results of the synod. And we shared with the community. There was, again, another maybe 100 people that gathered, all interested in what were the results of the synod, young and old, and various ways of thinking. We're all present. And we were able to present to them this model, this new way of being. And without question, there were questions, and there were concerns, and because it was new. It was a new way of thinking. But again, as we deepened the conversation, as people began to see what this model was meant to do, particularly in relationship to the synod, particularly in relationship to a new moment in the world and the church as it is today, they saw in it, I would say, above all, hope. And they were excited by that hope. They were animated by that hope. In a church sometimes that they said didn't always give them reasons for great hope, the wider church. And I would particularly highlight the young. That the young that were there really voiced their support of this way of thinking, of seeing themselves in this new model. It's far more inclusive, far more forward-thinking, more in tune with the world that they were living in, and a world that oftentimes they felt quite alienated from because of some of their experiences in church. And they were very honest about it and about their peers. And they saw in this model something that they could grab onto, live into, and really find a way to see themselves living Catholic into the future and as Passionists. So I offer you this vision today, this model that we're developing in Canada. We hope as it continues to develop, we'll be learning. There'll be mistakes, there'll be movements that we have to correct or things that we have to modify, but it's all going to be at the service of the mission, of deepening that mission and learning. And hopefully we're not only going to be learning for Toronto, we're going to be learning for all of our ministries to become more effective in being Passionists and being the ministers of the word of the cross. So thank you for listening, for sharing these moments today. And I ask you to pray for the people of Toronto, and we continue our work to stand in solidarity with the crucified, to hear the cry of the earth, and to above all, to continue to center in our hearts the crucified Christ.